Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have David Shiller, the president of Lighting Solution Development. Yeah, he's a consultant, so we're going to get into him with a bit. But before we go there, Greg, we got to go back to the original, brother. The original, energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. The original. What do they got?
Well, Mike, what's the best light?
The best light?
Yeah, the best light is, I'm going to answer it for you. It's your light. It's a light you want.
Yeah,
right?
the one you
want.
want.
And Focus does that for you with a tube, with an LED tube. It fits in an existing fluorescent fixture. Everybody has fluorescent fixtures or troffers, maybe LED now at this point. But at one point you had that. These are LED tubes that can fit in the existing fluorescent socket. They're color tuning, dimmable, and they're low flicker. You don't have to rewire. You don't have to do anything funky. Just get the switch on the wall, get the action going, and focus.
And you know what? Just so people are watching, I'm sitting under an N-Focus system right now here in the studio. So, we can just just dim it. There it goes. It dims down, right? There's the dimming. We got a switch on the wall. You can turn it up. And now we're going to go the other way with it. And we can go to higher Kelvin temperature if we want. We can switch it out to a higher Kelvin. There it goes. It's going to 5,000 K. Now it's up. Yep, there we go. Boom. That's how N-Focus works. I got it right here in my studio, folks. That's right. So go to
What do you record at, Mike?
I record in Get a Grip Studio. I record at 27K.
No, color.
27K.
Okay,
but I'm going to do 5,000 for this one because I just changed it out. And I want to rock and roll here. I don't want to keep the listeners waiting. So go to ENERGYFOCUS.com for the original and proud members of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's right, NAILD.org, baby. Get associated. Come on. But for right now, David Shiller. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hello, gentlemen. Going well. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Say hello to Greg Ehrich.
Good morning, Greg.
Morning, Dave. Thanks for being on.
So, tell us a little bit about your consulting firm and what you guys do there for advanced lighting manufacturers. What is that? What is an advanced lighting manufacturer, first of all? That's the first question. What do you mean by that?
It's generally the manufacturers that have been pushing the envelope in the adoption of LED and controls and all the sort of advanced technology end of the lighting industry, which you guys know well. But the companies that are working to be at the front end of that revolution are what I refer to as the advanced lighting industry.
And what kind of consulting are you doing? Is it product related or is it marketing related, or what are you doing with people?
Turns out it's both. We help out with product development, a lot of business development, marketing, some certification and compliance, utility rebates, and recruiting. So those are the typical kinds of services we provide. This past year with the pandemic, there's been a lot of effort to help manufacturers grow despite the pandemic, using some digital marketing techniques, and I'm hoping we can talk a bit more about that today.
That sounds like a broad range of services you guys do. Is there one that you feel stronger suited towards, and you have others that help with other things, or how do you work it?
Absolutely, I've got a half dozen associates that have different strong skill sets. One is great at utility rebates. I have graphic designers, a digital marketing expert, and with all of these people, I'm able to offer that broad range of services.
And I want to thank you because according to your bio, you invented the GU24 lamp base.
Yes, you can start throwing the fruit at me if you want.
No, man, you know how many GU24s I sold? Oh, Jesus.
Oh, good.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Speaking of that process, so can you break that down a little? I know it might have been a while ago, but it's an interesting one because everybody had a medium socket, and then it was like, all right, now we're going to make it so they can't go to back to that incandescent. They have to have a GU24 base. Unique idea. What went into that process? How long did it take? Give us the ins and outs of it.
So that was 2 lifetimes ago. I was working for the EPA Energy Star program at that time. And at that time, the program was promoting, I don't know if you remember this, 4-pin PL lamp fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
And they came with lots of problems.
Mm-hmm.
People couldn't change wattage. They couldn't change, they couldn't dim. There were lots of issues, and those were CFL fixtures at that time. So there was an effort made to standardize what was called a socket ballast that would just twist in and out and then take the 4-pin PL lamp.
Mm-hmm.
And they agreed on a base for that, and it was the GU24 base. And then I worked with the industry to say, look, let's just skip the 4-pin PL altogether, go to a what we would call a regular CFL at that time, and just integrate it with the GU24 base. And now you've got a replaceable lamps just like everybody was used to and everybody wanted.
Mm-hmm.
They could change wattages. They could change lamps. They could, if a ballast failed, it was trivial. So that was the impetus. It also ended up being cheaper and smaller, which is very important for lighting manufacturers,
especially for CFLs.
Yeah,
like it
exactly.
reduced the overall length of a CFL. And I'll tell you one thing. Like I still sell thousands of that squat GU24, thousands of those bulbs. I'm not kidding you, man. I get orders for those bulbs every single day.
The length.
I don't doubt it. Yeah. And even with the transition to LED, GU24 had a role for a while with California Title 24 and Energy Star, but then both of those efforts decided to go to medium screw base. And at this point, I imagine GU24 is just replacing, legacy installations at this point. It doesn't have the purpose it once did.
One of my vendors has 27,000 GU24 sockets in stock. So if anybody wants any, they can call that company up. They would love to sell those.
I bet they
I think
would.
it's 27,000. They sent me the list of their dead stock. You want any of these? Nah, I don't think so. All right.
So you went through the process of inventing the GU24 base, or you took the 4-pin in that and made it into a whole complete unit?
Well, because I was with the Energy Star program at the time, my goal wasn't to own it. My goal was to get the residential lighting industry to adopt it at that time. Mm-hmm. And so I came up with the concept, sold it to my management. They liked the idea of smaller, less expensive, easier for end users. And so I pushed that to the manufacturers in the program, the Energy Star program, and they adopted it.
Nice. So you do have a product development background. Are there any other products out there that you've invented or had a part of or patented or anything like that?
There were other attempts. Maybe didn't take off like the GU24 did. Had some flush mount CFL downlights. Tested at Home Depot at one point, but that didn't fly in the long term.
Nice. So you worked for manufacturers for a while. You worked for Energy. Did you say Energy Star, right? Yeah, EPA Energy Star. And
Correct.
How long have you been doing the consulting for?
Actually, celebrating my 10th year doing that. So
nice.
It's been a while. Worked with many dozens of manufacturers and have had a good time doing it. Some of them have been with me for 8 years of the 10, so it's been a good run.
And you do your LinkedIn says freelance writing. I feel like I've seen your articles. So what are some of the articles you do? Who do you write for?
I did quite a few articles for Enlightenment magazine when they were still publishing. And I've done some articles for David Gordon's website, Electrical Trends, I believe it is. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And I've had other articles in various trade pubs here or there.
And then you are active with the American Lighting Association.
Yes, I'm co-chair of their engineering committee.
What does that consist of?
Generally, it's primarily manufacturers in the American Lighting Association, so the more residential and decorative lighting manufacturers, and it's their product development engineers get together and talk about the latest challenges in technology and regulations and standards. Some of it, I think, most people would find fascinating, and some of it might make people pull their hair out. It can get pretty technical, but it's always interesting. You always find out the latest cutting edge problems, if not solutions, because they're sharing what they're up against.
Yeah, is there any major thing you guys are tackling right now that you can share, or in terms of technology?
I can share that they've just published in the past week or so on their website, which is open to the public, a new document that talks about the trade-offs of doing socketed luminaires versus hardwired LED luminaires. From a product development standpoint, there's a lot of different kinds of trade-offs. I mean, I think it's a 30 or 40 page document. And it's intended to help, this version is intended to help manufacturers make that decision of socketed versus integrated. And there are advantages to each. It's not one is always better than the other.
What's your position on? I actually think that it depends on how you look at that issue, right? So that issue is very is multifaceted. It has a lot of different areas to it when one looks at it. So from a lighting design perspective, or from a sleekness, or from a that perspective, certainly hardwired or purpose built, or whatever term you want to use to describe that type of fixture, that is the way to go. From that perspective, you're looking at maintenance, environmental responsibility, long-term life cycle. So what I've always said in the lighting business is we've increased the lifetime of the light source, but we've decreased the life cycle of the asset. Right? So in the past, you'd have a troffer. Like sometimes we retrofit troffers that are 60 years old, 50 years old, 40 years old. Right? Then they're still they've been gutted for T12, and now they're T8, and then they were LED now, and there's still the same piece of metal there in the ceiling. And so you'd have a life cycle, say, of 25 years. That's how the government would amortize a lighting system. So you would write off the capital over 25 years. This 10-year warranty stuff and everything else, you're looking at 5 to 10 year life cycle for a purpose-built LED luminaire. In terms of light output, in terms of the drivers failing, LED arrays failing. And I think there's serious environmental concerns about that in terms of embedded carbon. Like if we look at energy efficiency, like how much energy does it take to make a light fixture, right? People don't think about that, but that's very important. How much does it cost to ship it across the ocean, right? How much energy is involved in that? And then customer annoyance. It's very fussy to tell people they can't fix a light fixture. Like that's something that, you tell somebody. I had a lady email me this morning saying, I'm building a house. What do you think of these lights? And I'm like, don't like the brand that they spec. And I also want you to know that there's no replaceable components in that light fixture, in that little round flat panel that you're buying and putting 400 of them in your house. How do you deal with that from a consulting perspective? Those are ethical choices, eh? That's an ethical dilemma. That dilemma.
It's an ethical dilemma, but it's a multi-dimensional dilemma. You said that, we've increased source lifetime, but decreased luminaire lifetime. That's true with the integrated luminaires. But if you think about lamp luminaires, you haven't necessarily reduced the life on a lamp luminaire. So that's where some of those trade-offs come in that I was talking to you about. You've clearly thought about these issues way more than most people, and I commend you for it. And that's just part of all the issues and trade-offs of lamps versus integrated. So the way I think about it is the higher end of the market, higher end performance, higher end style, design, all of those tend to favor integrated. And then lower end tends to favor lamped for a whole variety of reasons. The manufacturer punts on getting certifications and regulatory compliance to the lamp maker. Those are all sort of behind the scenes decisions that luminaire makers have to make. Do they tackle Title 24 and Energy Star, or do they let the lamp maker do the heavy lifting there? Even things like safety listing.
And so
it's complicated.
But is it time for like a NEMA, say, or ANSI or UL or someone to step up and say, you know what, even on the purpose-built side, Jaga Consortium's another one of these arenas where they discuss this stuff. Is it time to sort of firm up those mechanical form factors on LED arrays, the size of LED driving boxes? You know what I'm saying? Like to firm that up and say, look, LED drivers between this and this voltage and this output, minimum milliwatt output, whatever the hell it is, has to be this size with a screw hole here and a screw hole there. And an LED array has to be in this, and the screws go here in it. And it has a little clip at the end, which we undo and we remove and we put a new one in and we clip it back in and we replace it. Is it time for the industry to step in and just get that done?
I would say, you mentioned Zaga and Zaga Consortium definitely worked on that, especially at the engine level, the LED engine level. And they worked on the interconnects and making sure an interconnection was thermally, mechanically, and optically interchangeable, interoperability between brands, things like that, where the mounting holes are. So Zaga attempted to do some of what you're saying at sort of the LED light engine level, but of course it's voluntary to follow Zaga, and in fact there's costs if you want to be certified that you're Zaga. So nobody has forced the industry to adopt specific module form factors. I'm not sure. The industry didn't want that because it was evolving so quickly and innovating so quickly. It didn't want to be hamstrung. I mean, think about it. We wouldn't want to be hamstrung by the decisions made 10 years ago on things like
disaster
the technology, because it's gone light years since in the past 10 years. So that's one of the big reasons nobody wants to hamstring the industry right now with specific form factors. Things keep getting smaller and better.
Greg, let me just jump in here quick. I know you want. I know you're hot, but let me just come in. This is where the Silicon Valley crowd has to go to hell, because I'm so sick of hearing about creative destruction and how wonderful that is, and how what you need to do is you need to come into a business and disrupt the business and come in hot. And dude, we're not making addictive software that makes people envious of one another. Okay, the lighting is mission critical. And what happened in the lighting industry, Greg, 10 years ago, is we had a whole bunch of people enter the industry and start telling the industry what was up, and all manner of mistakes and disasters happened. Okay? We've caused the dark sky issue has been exacerbated beyond belief to now where it's probably a human health issue. I mean, this is all as a result of this idea of the positive surrounding disrupt and wreck up and flip the table over and all this sort of stuff that, people, when they're talking about their cell phones and they're talking about software that, whatever people share naked pictures of each other with, it's disrupt. We're talking about critical infrastructure, and it got disrupted very badly. and it's almost in a recovery state, David. Like the industry is almost recovering from this wound that it took from, all these people coming in, say 5,000K, total uniformity on street lights, non-HPS is bad, 5,000K is good. All these kind of ideas that were brought in by that Silicon Valley disrupt crowd, Johnny come lately in the lighting marauders. And we are recovering from that. And how do we get back to the days where, and I'm serious about this, where NEMA made a lamp specification for a 4-pin CFL and people manufactured to that. And you could cross brands, and one ballast could work on another person's fixture. And everyone did well then, Greg. There was no problems then.
Yeah, and I want David to chime in, but I like to paint the real world picture because this happened to me an hour ago. Right before this, I was at a customer site. We installed wide body LED purpose built vapor tights 6 years ago. What's the warranty? 5 years, right? So what happens? There's 400 some fixtures there, and I went there and I walked the 4 different buildings, and some of them have actually some of them have tubes. That's a whole nother story. The tube fixtures are working fine. How about I'll say that the LED tubes are. Now the wide body vapor tights are from a manufacturer that was fluorescent high bay manufacturer. They became an LED one. Then they got bought out and they became part of a large company. Won't say the names or anything, but anyways, so that exact fixture you can no longer buy the same exact look. So I was there today, and these vapor tights had the chips in them, and some of them had a quarter of the fixture out, so like one portion of a strip. The others had half of it out, and then others were 3/4, others were full, and you can't replace the component. Well, you can try to get the chipboards to match, but now the manufacturer that bought that one makes 4 strips instead of 2. So the LED strips are totally different. The drivers are totally different. So you have to replace the whole damn fixture. 6 years old. They paid for a long life fixture, and that's what happens.
David, before you comment, have I been to this place maybe with our sons 6 years ago? On a little trip down water slides and all that? Is it that place?
No, not that one. Not that.
Because I went to that place with you in 2015, and I told you after you did that job, you're going to be changing all those lights out in 5 years, Bob.
Those are tough to get too. We've had to replace a few. Not as bad, but this was a warehouse, so no, we did not go to that one.
All right, David.
Well, I mean, you just raised again the trade-offs between lamps versus integrated, and you've highlighted it nicely. Maybe there's retrofit kits out there with new modules, and probably would have to replace the drivers as well. That might solve that problem without replacing all the fixtures. If not, yeah, that's a pickle.
Yeah. There are retrofit kits that can work for it, but again, they're totally different looking. So some fixtures are going to have 2 strips, some are going to have 4, some are going. So from the customer standpoint, it's odd. And so to Mike's point, yes, we need to set it so that everybody does it the same way, so that we can replace down the road. Because there's nothing worse than that. 6 years. Come on.
That's 2 fluorescent bulbs. That's a fluorescent bulb and a half.
Yeah.
That's the lifetime of a fluorescent bulb and a half, or 2 fluorescent bulbs. That's it.
Right.
Gone.
That's it. And we're going to keep running into that. And we can keep doing purpose-built fixtures now, and then 6 years from now, same idea is going to happen. Or somebody can step up and say, all right, put your bolt holes here, put your driver this size, do all that. And David, you say we're not getting to that point? It's not going to happen?
Well, there has been, in some parts of the industry, a movement back to lamp fixtures to avoid those types of problems, so that you can just continue replacing lamps when they go out. That doesn't work for every situation. Not when you want low profile, high end LED design. That's typically not going to fly. But there have been movements back to lamp fixtures to avoid those headaches. Like Title 24 did that. Energy Star's done that. Zaga went to standardized light engines in some modules. So there's definitely been efforts to create the options for long-term relamping and component replacements. But to get the best LED designs, you bake in some obsolescence down the road, which is a trade-off, a major trade-off, and hopefully people know that when they're picking them. But that's not always the case, and then there's gnashing of teeth.
Yeah. Well, to shift gears a little bit, you talked about digital marketing. Give us a
hang on. Before we go, before we change gears, I would say there's two roads here, and these are long roads. There's a whole bunch of issues in the lighting industry. The darkness issue is an issue. Okay, I think what would be an interesting play is if, the high end, you're always going to want to be able to do whatever you want with the technology. You don't want to be restricted, right? We don't want to restrict people. But what I would say is, why not just force them to have DC to the fixture? That would change the game entirely. So if you said that like it had to be PoE or it had to be DC. So if you want to make AC light fixtures, they like break it up by electricity source. Okay? So the way to do it would be, if you want to make fixtures that are AC, okay, then they have to be modular. They have to have replaceable components in these form factors that are traditional lighting shapes, T5, T8, whatever you want, okay? But if you want to make these fancy schmancy suckers, the power supply has to be DC, not a on fixture board AC to the fixture. You have to wire them with PoE, or you have to wire them with DC. And we were talking to Gabe Arnold at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratories. And what he was suggesting, we call him the technical prophet, what he was suggesting was that, or what I suggested to him was that you're trying to make LEDs like the incandescent lamp. Because if you have DC to the fixture, you don't really need drivers anymore. Now, I don't know if that's true 100%. But if we could say that, okay, no problem. You want to do $1,100 light fixture? Okay, then you have to tell your electrician that they're wiring those DC, and all that's possible. You can do that right now. That's not a problem. That's possible to do. That would be a good way to split the industry and say, if you want linkable, you want Bluetooth ready, all this kind of stuff, you can't supply it with AC. You have to rewire it so it's DC. And then you could belt the road that way for the industry. And say, if it's AC, it has to be replaceable. The form factors have to be traditional lighting shapes. That's the end of the story. And if you want to make these fancy schmancy, you got all the money in the world, do you? To pay $70,000 for your office lights? Great. Another $10,000 to make it DC. Because if you got the money, you got the money, right? I think that would be my suggestion to the industry. Break it up by how you supply electricity to them. Then we don't have any more issues. I don't know. What do you think about that?
You've just brought up a whole lot of issues. That's a lot of stuff to throw in. So starting about taking a fixture and providing DC to it, it still requires a driver, but a much smaller, simpler driver that doesn't have the conversion from AC to DC in it. It's just basically it's a driver to protect the chips at that point, for the constant current or constant voltage. So you don't completely eliminate the driver, and for DC fixtures, you're also pushing the inverter or you're pushing the technology that converts from AC to DC outside the fixture. It's still in the building somewhere. It's usually a much bigger unit that's driving many, many fixtures. But there's some efficiencies in that, which is why DC microgrids are growing in interest and activity. More companies are getting into the DC microgrid space, like Schneider Electric and others. So,
wouldn't that be a wonderful way to drive innovation into that arena?
Through some kind of forced requirements?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as soon as you try to force requirements, it becomes a very political discussion because there's winners and losers, and people have different levels of influence in whether it's at the government or a standard setting body. And once it gets political, that's a whole different direction. It has nothing to do with what's best for the end user, and it has nothing to do with what's best for the technology. It's what's best for the people or the companies involved. So it's difficult to regulate how manufacturers make fixtures. Only the governments, the U.S. feds and California have really taken that on. And in the case of the feds, it's usually to prevent the worst of the worst, not to try to drive any of the types of standardization you're talking about. And that's typically not what DOE or the feds have focused on. They just try to block the least efficient product.
And there's that's really
challenge.
rugged too. That's actually really crude. Those laws that they make, like the one that Donald Trump struck down, it was probably the right move to just strike it down, because you need to make that more surgical. That needs to be more surgical. Like, you can't just say incandescent lights are gone. There's a lot of things that rely on incandescent lights that there's no LED replacement for. And now you're creating garbage. You're taking your infrastructure and you're turning it into garbage. All manner of indicator lamps, and they're very crude with those types of regulations where they try to block, right? They try to block something, and I don't like that. It's almost like it's about self-interest and stupidity here, David. Like, that's what you're talking about. It's either self-interest, and when it goes politics, it goes stupid. And now I'm with stupid. It's a politician over here. Right? We gotta figure it out. It's like I like that stuff makes me feel disgusted and sick. It's like we can't get anything done. Greg, call Joe Biden right now. He's coming on the show.
Next step.
Well, the odds are that the drive to push more regulations will probably increase now with the new administration, right? You were talking about how the last administration stopped some certain regulations from going into effect. The new administration will probably, odds are, try to drive additional efficiency regulations, whether there's unintended consequences that make our industry pull our hair out or not.
Why doesn't the industry do it? In the old days, NEMA did it, right? NEMA was in charge of ballast and lamp shapes, I think. Was it NEMA or was it ANSI or both, kind of?
NEMA would write ANSI standards. Yeah, NEMA, okay. ANSI, they work together, or they're connected in some ways. NEMA writes ANSI standards, and they would define lamp bases and lamp holders and things like that I think you're talking about.
Yeah, like, how did they come up with an F20 T12 CW that everybody made? Like, that must have been some agreement that the industry made. It wasn't a law by the government, was it?
NEMA defines the lamp bases and the lamp holder form factors. And they still do. They did in the old days. They still do today.
All right, Greg.
And
okay.
And NEMA isn't the whole industry. Something to keep in mind is it was historically the big three, and obviously that whole world has changed. In many ways.
All right. Well, now,
so
now we can shift gears. I think Mike is done there, so you can take a breath. The digital marketing side of the business, how has that obviously changed majorly in the last year? Give us your input on that.
So if you think about it, the way our industry loved to sell, and this is true whether you were a manufacturer or distributor, maybe even for contractors, the preferred way of selling and marketing was face-to-face, whether it was counter days, branch barbecues, trade shows, conferences, or just one-on-one face-to-face meetings. That was always the preferred way to build the relationship, which was usually the highest goal of all. So COVID did a number on that, right? Face-to-face is the one thing we weren't supposed to do. So that created a problem. And at the same time, COVID did knock the industry down about 20% for the lighting industry for the past year, roughly speaking. And there were some areas like DIY that did much, much better. and other areas that did worse. So one of the things that has been working for some in the lighting industry is moving toward digital automation for lead generation. And I know that's a lot of long words, but basically it's using some software programs to do the heavy lifting of reaching hundreds or thousands of contacts. And we've all, gotten stupid spam, if you will, that was poorly targeted and was wasting our time. But it's possible now to get more and more targeted and to create better and better, more relevant messaging. And that's really the direction that I'm trying to help my clients with. And most are manufacturers, but I'm talking to a lot of distributors now as well. And this allows you to target contractors or OEMs or facility managers, even down to specific verticals like oil and gas or higher ed, all the verticals, commercial office buildings. And by targeting really tight in these campaigns, you can create more relevant messages that are more useful, higher value to the person receiving them. And then you increase the response rates and the reply rates, which is the purpose of the campaign, is to generate hot leads.
So what David is saying is his spam is not spam.
It's the highest quality spam you can eat is basically what I'm saying.
That's nice.
Fancy spam.
Fancy spam. We serve it on a platter on a little cracker with some caviar on it. Yeah.
But to the businesses, it helps them grow their business despite the pandemic. And of course, that's what they care about.
When you have these kind of disruptive events that happen in the world, there's this explosion of UVC is a perfect example of this. So you have an explosion of interest. Everybody jumps in, right? Everybody jumps in, and then you see that mushroom cloud kind of fades, but there's fallout, and there's areas where that stays and changes the industry permanently, right? So you have that. There's UVC lighting is going to be part of the game. It hasn't sorted itself all out yet. But there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in that passive air, active air disinfection for, in their offices, the surface disinfection. Whether I think people are going to use surface disinfection in general areas, I don't know, but certainly an airport bathroom would be a nice place for surface disinfection. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that at all. So there's areas where like the things land. With this type of digital marketing, when we talk to the board of Nailed and when we talk to people are hungry to get back together. They want to get to the golf course. They want to see their friends. They want to shake hands again. What though has permanently changed, David, in relationship to this? Like, what's the permanent change that's always going to be different now?
That's a great question, because everybody wants things to sort of go back to the before times, to before COVID. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen just because we want it to. So a couple of things to keep in mind is there will be lingering concerns. Some people are more worried about COVID than other people, even though everyone's moving toward vaccination. There's going to be a long tail of people concerned about COVID. That's one issue. Travel budgets have been, may never be the same, right? Companies have learned that they've saved a whole lot of money during COVID on travel for a sales team and on things like trade shows. So the budgets for travel and trade shows and things like that have been upended, disrupted, and they may or may not go back to the way they were before COVID. Some companies are liking the trim, leaner travel sales budgets and marketing budgets. So those are some of the reasons. And if some companies get good at digital marketing, they may not feel the need to go back. So there are different forces, and some are, also work from home. Not everybody's going to give up the trend toward work from home that happened this year. And if people aren't at their office, the face-to-face isn't the same.
It's a little awkward.
It may be a lot more work to get a face to
It's a
get a
little awkward to
face-to-face.
go over to someone's house, actually. Hey, yeah, come on over to my house. What? Okay.
Right,
Well,
right.
you know what? Here's what's interesting. So when I bought this software, this is a digital software that like ESPN would use. We bought like a light version of it, right? So what we're recording on now, we can do high definition. Scott can turn it down so if your internet connection isn't that strong, we can turn it down or whatever. But this is the same software that ESPN or CNN would use. We're using the same one. We bought it 5 years ago or 4 years ago or whenever it was. And what was interesting was I was so proficient, and Greg was so proficient at these what people call Zoom calls. I used Google Hangouts primarily. And what would happen was like my accountant would charge me to drive to see me. Okay, for example, travel time. Right? So when my accountant would come see me, it would be 1 hour with me and then 1 hour to drive here, 1 hour to drive back. I'd get a bill for 3 hours. Okay? And I told them in 2018, no, we're going to do it on Google Hangouts. And you know this person, Greg.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, what? What are you talking about? I don't want to be on the screen of a computer. That's weird, actually. It's kind of like, is it pornography? Like what? Like people were kind of freaked out about it, right? In a way. They were like, what? I don't know. Are you recording this? What's happening? That has been vaporized. Every grandmother now knows how to do a Zoom call, right? That has been completely vaporized. And there are so many permanent efficiencies from that will never go away. The screen sharing, the multi-person collaborations that you can do on Zoom calls are I don't like giving them pub, but on video calls over the internet, it's so powerful, that technology. And I think we're going to immerse ourselves more and more into that, where there's going to be a transition towards avatar-like softwares are going to come out, where you're going to put on that Oculus headset and David's going to be sitting here and Greg's going to be sitting there. And we have that type of material they have. You can put a suit on. I think that's like as technology develops, I think we're going to like that trend towards that is never going away. And it's going to be fueled by not even by business. It'll be fueled by other industries, which I won't mention, but I think you know what I'm talking about. The original internet industry that half the internet is about, pornography. I'll just say it. That will fuel that. That will give you all the tech. People will pay for that like crazy, and the technology will be developed. And then I think more and more there's going to be a trend like, our children may go to events every now and then, but the default setting of sending half your employees to Lightfair and it costs you $150,000 or $250,000 or $1 million, I don't know if that's out there anymore for a long time. I don't think that those plays are out there. I don't know. Greg, what do you think, man?
I'm with you. I mean, I think it's definitely made things more efficient, and I think a lot of people are just going to take that on and not change now. They're going to stay with it. Just makes it a lot easier on your schedule and everything else. So I think there's people that are going to want to do it, and they're just going to force themselves to do what they did in the past when they don't actually always need to do it. So it'll be a decision that people are going to make.
David,
I agree. I think there'll be less people. There'll be less travel, maybe fewer trade shows, not zero, but people will go to fewer. That could result in some of them going out of business. We saw some go out of business this year already. So there's going to be a sort of recalibration, a rebalancing of travel versus video and other digital solutions. There's many different kinds of digital solutions, and I can talk about some that have been the most effective from where I sit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Before you do that, I make one point. I think you're going to see travel go to higher value, higher intimacy. Like smaller events where you know who you're seeing, why you're seeing, and you really just want to get to know that person a lot better. I think you're going to see a trend towards that you go to Light and Build in Germany, 50,000 people, buses taking people everywhere, 20 buildings. Can't get a hotel room. I don't know if that sort of stuff's going to really survive in its previous form. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So
I think it'll shrink back. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're all familiar with automated email campaigns, and perhaps you've been hit by automated LinkedIn, and they can work to a degree. What I've found has been highly effective is combining the two and taking your list of 1,000 contacts or whatever the number might be, highly targeted, and hitting them from both email and from LinkedIn, for example. And what it does is it drives up response rates, gets you more hot leads. So the other thing I mentioned was targeting very tightly. So you could target facility managers in a specific vertical. You could target contractors in a particular geographic region. And in doing that, you can create the messaging that's much more relevant to them. And that can also drive up response rates and success. One of the other important techniques is what I call auto personalization. Sounds impossible, but a lot of the software programs allow personalization of the emails and LinkedIn messages in ways that make them feel more authentic and get better response rates. So, for example, in some of our campaigns, every contact's name would be in their messaging, their headshot grabbed from LinkedIn, their company name, their company logo, even a screen grab of their company webpage. And the software can do all of that. So you can imagine that has a different feel when if some people get emails that have their own name, their own face, information about their own company in the email or the LinkedIn message or both. Some other differences with these type of campaigns, they're called throttled or drip campaigns, and they slow down how fast they go out, and that can avoid a lot of problems. So these are some of the techniques that have been very successful for us.
I'm going to make, I also am a consultant, and I'm going to do a little consulting for you. I'm going to send you the invoice after.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to hit you up. But I think there's a problem in your industry, in the lead generation industry. So I've dealt with lead generation companies, and some of them really turned me off with some of their tactics. Like one of them, a fake LinkedIn profile with a nice looking girl but not too good looking, and she's got a funky name, and that's the person that contacts them, but that person's not real. And then you get contacted by somebody else, and like that kind of stuff is a little bit sleazy to me. But I think that you said the word hitting. I think you need to change your terminology, the way you talk about doing this. Because when you say hitting people, there's something offensive in that. Like when I hear that, I don't want to hit people. I don't hit anybody, Greg. Do you hit anybody? I never hit people.
Sometimes.
You hit them sometimes? But no, for me, like I think that the way that lead generation companies talk about it is the way the terminology they use. It makes the people who are receiving the emails less than human. And I think that you need to humanize it. I think if you were to stop using that terminology, like whenever I call, we're going to hit this, we're going to hit you with 50,000 emails. Like, I don't want to hit anybody, bro. I don't hit people. That's not my style. How do we contact them, get them and nudge them towards our company? Like change the way we talk about this, because especially if you're going to do it so good, David, it's like, you're not going to hit people. You're going to nudge them. A little nudge. Nothing wrong with I nudge people. So I think that the way we talk about lead generation, because lead generation is also very important to Greg and I think the way we talk about it is key, David. We got to change that and humanize the people that are receiving this message as much as possible, so that that authenticity starts from the way we talk about it. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like in saying hitting, it's inauthentic. The contact is immediately inauthentic, no matter how good it is.
Food for thought. I will have to chew on that. But I do agree with you that a real person is much better than a fake LinkedIn profile. We recommend there's one designated person at the company that all the messages go out from, and then all the interested responses come back to that one person, and they're a real real salesperson.
Well, you're going to get hit right now. You're going to get hit with the original. That's right. The original, the light I'm under right now, flicker-free, energy focus, brother, their end focus lighting system. You got to go to ENERGYFOCUS.com, Greg, for energy focus.
You spelled it right. Color tuning, dimming, LED tubes. Keep your existing fixture. We had some discussion today on that, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
This has that option to keep your existing fixture, make it easy so you can replace it down the line. It is very affordable too. That's the other thing that is very important to stress with this. A lot of this stuff sounds great, but it's not practical or affordable. This system is 27K up to 65K dimming, low flicker as well, built into the LED tube.
Boom, you just got hit with end focus. That's right. The original flicker-free, always coming out hot with the good products. Yeah. ENERGYFOCUS.com. And of course, proud members, Greg, of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org. My hat, I wore my hat out. It's worn out.
Good. I'll send you that one.
Send me another one, brother. Send me another hat.
Yeah.
Of course, David Shiller. Hey, if you made it to the end with us, say bye to the peeps, David. He's waving.
Thank you, guys. Thanks to
Thanks,
everyone listening, and thanks to you too.
Yeah, it was great fun. Bye for now, folks.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. You are lost, Lord is there to find you.